The very last two lines of that kind of sum up the passage for me. The phrase, repairer of the breach. You shall be the repairers of the breach. And on some days, I feel like the breach that is in need of repair is so vast, and I can get overwhelmed thinking about where to start. And then, of course, I think we'll start where we are. So where are we, church? We are a church that has a reputation for welcoming people, for being a place where you can bring your whole self. Yes? That sounds familiar, yeah? Okay. You know, those gifts are needed. They're needed. They're needed in all seasons. And I think, of course, we need them especially now, because we are still feeling the effects from the pandemic. And the COVID virus is still out there spreading. And patterns of life have shifted dramatically with the shutdown, and they're not all just coming back online. We are changed. Our patterns have shifted. There are breaches of faith and trust. Our ability to connect with each other is somehow different. And I still don't know everyone in our church by your face because I'm so used to seeing this part of you. And I don't know about you, but right now, seeing someone's nose is kind of a moment of, wow. There's a breach between what I'm used to seeing and like the full face, and who knew that that was coming? What are the breaches in our lives, big, small, that we want to see repaired? I could answer that, but I'd like you to answer that, so I'm going to ask you again and then invite you to take a moment to just answer it for yourself. What are the breaches in our lives, big and small, that we want to see repaired? Do you have your answer? Or at least one? Okay. So how do we begin? Where do we start? What are the tools that we as Christians possess to help us repair breaches? So I want to offer one to you, and it may be really obvious, but we have this table. And whose table is this? Christ's. It's God's. It is a symbolic table for sure. And our sacrament of communion has, over the past 2,000 years, become very ritualized and symbolic. And yet each time that we gather at this table, we talk about where the story began. Humble, scared people in the midst of their world ripping apart came together and shared a meal. And there was scandal in that group of people. There was betrayal by a dear friend. There was the story goes, there's a fickle crowd and a sham justice system and the death of our Savior. And all of that, in the midst of all of that, there was still this meal that we go back to again and again and again to feed ourselves. Because we believe that there is power in that table, for it can be a place of repair and reparation. For fun, I've been reading this book called Bread and Wine, a love letter to life around the table with recipes. It is by the author Shauna Nyquist. And Nyquist is a Christian author who's written a handful of books, and some are bestsellers. One is on my shelf. It's called Present Over Perfect. She comes from the mega church world, but let's not hold that against her. And also, I'm going to read to you from her book, and I got it from the public library. It is way overdue, but if you want it, I'm going to return it this afternoon so you can go and get in line. This book is a collection of stories and recipes from her life as a host of dinner parties and a baker of bread, and a person in relationship with friends and family over time. There are some recipes in this book I would very much like to try, not because they sound glorious, it's not Pinterest, it's not going to go on the board, but because it just sounds so easy and warming for a crowd. And her whole thing is like, have one good meal that you can manipulate depending on what's in your fridge and enjoy the people that are around your table. And so as I began reading this book, I would get very hungry. And I knew that I should not go get a snack. I should just read the book and go to bed, and it was hard. And at some point that got the better of me, and I almost didn't get through the book. I put it down. But I'm really glad that I did, because I want to share with you some of her words about building community around the table. This is called Come to the Table. This is what I want you to do. I want you to tell someone you love them, and dinner's at 6. I want you to throw open your front door and welcome the people you love into the inevitable mess with hugs and laughter. I want you to light a burner on the stove to chop and stir and season with love and abandon. Begin with an onion and a drizzle of olive oil, and go from there, any one of a million different places, any one of a million different meals. Gather the people you love around your table and feed them with love and honesty and creativity. Feed them with your hands and the flavors and smells that remind you of home and beauty and the best stories you've ever heard, the best stories you've ever lived. There will be a day when it all falls apart. My very dear friend lost her mom this year. That same month, another friend's marriage ended, shot through with lies and heartbreak. A friend I hadn't talked to in ages called late one Sunday night to ask me how to get through a miscarriage. The bleeding, she said, has already begun. And as I write, a dear family friend lies in a coma in a hospital bed. These are things I cannot change. Not one of them. Can't fix, can't heal, can't put the broken pieces back together. But what I can do is offer myself, wholehearted and present, to walk with the people I love through the fear and the mess. That's all any of us can do. That's what we're here for. Not the battle lines keeping people in and out, not the pro and anti stances, but the presence, the listening, the praying with and for on the days when it all falls apart, when life shatters in our hands. The table is where we store up for those days, where we log minutes and hours, building something durable and strong that gets tested in those terrible split seconds. And the table is where we return to stitch our hearts back together after the breaking. I want you to stop running from thing to thing to thing, and to sit down at the table, to offer the people you love something humble and nourishing, like soup and bread, like a story, like a hand holding another hand while you pray. We live in a world that values us for how fast we go, for how much we accomplish, for how much life we can pack into one day. But I'm coming to believe it's in the in-between spaces that our lives change, and that the real beauty lies there. Most of the time, I eat like someone's about to steal my plate. Like I can't be bothered to chew or taste or feel, but I'm coming to see that the table is about food, and it's also about time. It's about showing up in person, a whole and present person, instead of a fragmented, frantic person, phone in one hand, to-do list in the other. Put them down, both of them, twin symbols of the modern age, and pick up a knife and a fork. The table is where time stops. It's where we look people in the eye, where we tell the truth about how hard it is, where we make space to listen to the whole story, not the textable soundbite. They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. I believe that's absolutely true. Not that the way to land a guy is by baking him cookies, although it never hurts. But that, if you can satiate a person's hunger, you can get a glimpse of their heart. There's an intimacy in it, in the meeting of needs and the filling of one's stomach that is necessarily tied to the heart. I want you to gobble up life in huge bites, tasting everything, trying every new flavor, remembering every smell and texture like it's the best thing you've ever had. I want you to live with wild and gorgeous abandon, throwing yourself into each day, telling the truth about who you are and who you are not, writing a love song to the world itself and to the God who made every inch of it. I want you to invest yourself wholly and deeply in friendship, God's greatest evidence of himself here on earth. More than anything, I want you to come to the table. In all sorts of ways, both literally and metaphorically, come to the table. We don't come to the table to fight or to defend. We don't come to prove or to conquer, to draw lines in the sand or to stir up trouble. We come to the table because our hunger brings us there. We come with a need, with fragility, with an admission of our humanity. The table is the great equalizer. The level playing field many of us have been looking everywhere for. The table is the place where the doing stops, the trying stops, the masks are removed, and we allow ourselves to be nourished like children. We allow someone else to meet our need. In a world that prides people on not having needs, on going longer and faster, on going without, on powering through, the table is a place of safety and rest and humanity, where we are allowed to be as fragile as we feel. If the home is a body, the table is the heart, the beating center, the sustainer of life and health. Come to the table. I hope and suspect that you too have shared in meaningful conversations around a table. And perhaps you too have favorite things you enjoy cooking when folks come over, or certain meals that will just take you back to a conversation or to a relationship in time. The act of coming around the table can be a sacred act. We practice coming together and being vulnerable as we partake in the act of communion. Because this ritual, this practice, is meant to set the tone and how we might act around tables and in our lives away from this space. And perhaps one of the hardest pieces, I think, is allowing ourselves to receive hospitality in a world that says we should be the ones giving and not receiving. The communion table is such an important symbol of our faith for lots of reasons that we could spend all day and all week talking about. And I just want to also hold up that it's a symbol that's a lot harder to market, to draw, than say a cross, 2 X's and you're there. But that symbol is everywhere if we want to see it. I hold it up today because we will celebrate the sacraments, and most of us have a table at home. And there are tables at parks, and there are tables at fast food places, and at 4-star restaurants, and on the beach. There are many places to share and to be repairers of the breach of relationship and community, for that is really where it all starts. So may we taste and see, may we love and share. May we allow God's Spirit to mend and bless our lives and our vast community. May we all come to God's table.